Glad to have you join us on today's edition of the Market Report. We are on to the second segment of our interview, talking about reviewing the first quarter of Nigerian economy. The Nigerian economy in the first quarter have performed in a mixed reaction that many analysts are saying, particularly with the issue that is bordering on the survival of Nigerians. Instructively, events in the first quarter of 2025 that shape and reshape Nigerian economy cannot be overestimated, starting with the federal government twin policy or subsidy removal, as well as exchange rate unification since 2023, are still having an effect on the economy. However, general economic outlook for Nigeria for 2025 suggests positive prospect with tapped inflation, a stable exchange rate, and moderate economic growth. On the other hand, the Central Bank of Nigeria and other institutions are expected to continue supporting the stability of the naira, particularly through intervention and anticipated moderation in inflation areas. A breakdown in the first quarter 2025 of Nigeria showed that GDP growth is hovering around 3.7%. GDP growth in the first quarter is hovering around 3.7%. Inflation stands at 24.48%. Food inflation remains at 23.51%. Naira exchange rate, as we speak right now, is now 1,537 as at the end of the first quarter 2025. The CBN Nigeria interest rate of 27.50% is still there. Unemployment 4.3%. Nigerian poverty level is projected to remain very high, with 87 million Nigerians still living below poverty line. That's about 38.9% of the population. Meanwhile, our foreign reserve is about 34.8 billion US dollar. Unemployment rate still stands at 4.3%. Crude oil production fluctuates between 1.5 million barrels per day to 1.78 million barrels per day. Joining me right now to explain some of these laudable data I've just presented to us is Assistant Professor Salim Hamza, Ringim. A very good day to you, Prof. A very good day to you.
Good day.
Thanks for joining me on the show. All right, Prof.
Good day. Thanks for having me.
All right, sir. So let's get the ball rolling. First and foremost, the breaking news that we aired this morning is that
yes, sir,
federal government is about to review the 54.99 trillion budget. The 2025 budget 54.99 trillion because of the U.S. tariff imposition on Nigeria. What do you have to say about that?
Actually, it's going to be a good policy because that will really improve the infrastructure and other forms of productivity of the country. Because if we look at the kind of structural reforms the government is trying to put in place, so this actually is going to be good for the economy.
Very interesting. Now, let's take a view of what the bottom of our discussion is all about today, the first quarter 2025 review of Nigerian economy. You have seen the listed of some of the things I'm pointing out. First and foremost is the unemployment rate that is 4.3%. What do you have to say about Nigerian unemployment rate in the first quarter of 2025?
When you talk about unemployment rates, the methodology of computing the unemployment is what matters. So let's be realistic. This 4.3% unemployment rate in Nigeria is not really tallying with what we have on ground. When we look at the underemployment rates in Nigeria, is still high because so many Nigerians are into informal jobs. And in terms of calculation of unemployment, we only consider the active working force and those who are willing to work and not able to find a job. So what we have on paper is entirely different with what we have. So job creation must be a real sustainable matrix, not just the statistics, actually.
Very interesting. Now, another issue that boils down to the first quarter 2025 economy of Nigeria is about the poverty rate. 38.9% of our population are still living under poverty line. What's your reaction to that?
This statistics is deeply concerning, actually. With nearly, that means like in every 10 Nigerians, 4 are living below the poverty line, which is really not good. for the country. So looking at the economic growth of 3.7%, which we consider as something very good when it comes to recovery process, is something positive. But that shows that in our economic growth, there is issue of inclusiveness. It means we have this problem of not inclusive in the whole economic growth. So it means some sectors are left out, and there is this high level of inequality in Nigeria, which also have to be addressed. And the issue of food security, limited access to healthcare, education, and employment. The government needs to give a proper attention to this, because 38.9% of poverty rates compared with 3.7 economic growth in this first quarter. That shows that we are really in a serious problem, and the government needs to come up with policies that will be inclusive in all sectors, and try as much as we can to reduce the inequality by providing social amenities to the less privileged and people living in the rural areas.
Now, Prof, take a look at one of the things that the government celebrated. I wanted to say, well, let's celebrate. But anyway, one of the things that the government celebrated was the downgrading of the inflation to 24.48%. And if you look at it, just oppose it with the food inflation that's about 23%. What do you have to say about both food inflation, as well as the core inflation that the government celebrated about 24.48% that we are seeing right now?
You see, the inflation rates, reduction of the actually is something that's supposed to be celebrated, actually. So the government is right, because the last quarter inflation rate was around 34.8%.
Exactly.
That was in December, yes. But in January this year, it's 24.48%. So that shows that there is a downward trend, which is something very good. But the question is this really reflecting in the social welfare of the citizens of Nigeria, the customers or the consumers? Despite the fact, we must admit that there is a positive reflection in the market. We see going down of prices of basic amenities and other things. So that shows that it's something good, but we still have issues that the consumer remain limited. Until we need to tell ourselves the reality that this inflation have to be at least a single digit. Because we are still having, double digits inflation. So it's supposed to be single, actually. And not only single, but sustainable single digits. And that is when we will see the reflection in the consumption of the typical Nigerians. But for now, actually, we are really feeling it, despite the pressure on the economy. So we really have to admit that the government have done well in terms of inflation. But another challenge is that, the government is reducing the inflation in the expense of interest rates.
Exactly.
And this increase in interest rate is really alarming, because it's increasing the cost of borrowing for investors, which is also not good for the economy.
Now, let's take a look at one of the very peculiar issues that is affecting Nigeria economy, not just in the first quarter of 2025, but currently now. Naira exchange to dollar as I speak right now on the official CBN platform is 1,611 naira. But at the end of the third quarter, it was 1,537 naira. What is your reaction to this, this brutal exchange that we are seeing right now? Because many Nigerians, as I speak, are not happy with the current situation of Naira depreciation against other foreign currency. 1,611 naira is quite very, very rare, even higher than what the government has projected in the 2025 budget.
You see, actually, the Naira exchange rate reflects the reality of unification in the market. Market, that means the post subsidy. But while the unification was necessary, actually. The unification, it's necessary for the government. But the volatility we are seeing today signals that there is more that has to be done in the exchange rates, because this fluctuation is really high in the forex exchange inflow and the non-oil sector exports and investors' confidence. So this is alarming, really, because if the volatility is this much high, that means we will still be having problems when it comes to our purchasing power and also non-oil export, as I mentioned earlier. So it's really not good for the economy. But this is due to the unification of the currency after the fuel subsidy.
Interesting.
Yes.
Now let's take a look at another aspect of the Nigerian economy, the performance of foreign external reserve. It is now 38.48 billion, 38.88 billion US dollar. Although in December 2024 it was 40 billion US dollar that we had, but as we speak right now it is 38 billion US dollar. What do you have to make of that? Because many people thought that, okay, with all that the CBN was doing, it's supposed to even have gone up to 50 billion US dollar, but here we are 38. That's where we are standing at the end of first quarter 2025.
Yes, actually it's relatively stable. Let's be sincere. Yes, but we still have to do more. We need to increase the exchange inflow. That means inflow of the foreign currency through the non-oil export. I always mention non-oil export because Nigeria is a monocultural economy.
Exactly.
So the moment something happens to the oil export, then that will shake the entire economy. So that is why I am laying emphasis on the non-oil export. And then diaspora remittance. Also, we should focus to that. And also FDI. FDI inflow, so that we can have a strong and resilient Naira. That is actually what we need to do. But relatively, it's relatively stable compared to what we have last year.
Very interesting. Now, another very intriguing aspect of the economy is the oil production. The federal government is targeting about 2.06 trillion for 2025 budget. But right now, between the first quarter, we only had between 1.5 million barrels per day and 1.7 million barrels per day. In your own assessment, why do we fluctuate between that level? Because the target of the government is close to about 1.8 million barrels per day, projected for 2025, beginning January.
This is really worrying, this situation that we are, this range, the fluctuation in the oil production. Nigeria needs to consistently meet with the OPEC quota. That means for the production, and that means when we constantly either we reach the quota or we exceed the quota, then that can maximize our revenue.
Exactly.
Because we cannot deny the fact that we are a monocultural economy. And that oil is what we heavily rely on. And that is the major source of our revenue. So for us to maximize the revenue, that means we have to increase the productivity or the production of oil. So issues like this pipeline vandalization, oil tape, and limited investment in the upstream sector needs to be addressed urgently by the government. Yes, in order to at least have a stable economy and a stable production of oil products. And we have to enhance our security in these oil-producing regions.
Very interesting, Prof. But let's also go to another very intriguing aspect of our economy. In 2025 first quarter, the federal government has spent 816 million US dollars for debt servicing, equating about 1.288 trillion naira. That is huge. And I know a lot of Nigerians will not be happy with government debt servicing about 816 billion US dollars in just 3 months. That's about 1.288 trillion naira. What is your reaction to this, Prof?
You see, this debt servicing of a thing is really eating the capital expenditure of Nigeria. That is it. And this is really terrible. This is serious for any economy. So Nigeria must urgently grow the revenue. That is what we just previously discussed, because we generate our revenue through oil export. So we have to maximize the revenue, we have to increase the revenue, and then we have to reduce our recurrent costs. That is it. Because our recurrent expenditure in the budget is very high. So we have to reduce it. Yes, not reducing our capital expenditure in order to service this external debt that we are having. And we have to consider restructuring the debt servicing. That means we can also come up with what is known as concessionary borrowing option. We can use that, okay? So that we can service this debt in order not to, cut away much of our capital expenditure. Yes.
Very interesting. Now, Prof, let's begin to look at way forward to all these issues we have highlighted, the data we have gotten in the first quarter of 2025, in the last 3 months, January, February, and March. Let's start with the CBN. Naira need to be stabilized. What would be your advice to the CBN going forward on stability for Naira?
You see, stability for Naira is very important because that will really stabilize our economy. Because this is a fact that we are not an exporting country. We don't produce, we import. For example, if we are an exporting country, so despite this instability of Naira can be in some sort of an advantage when it comes to export. Because if Naira, it's the exchange rate for Naira to dollar is Naira is really not that much valuable, then our export can increase. But in our own case, what we are exporting is in dollar. That means oil. So definitely we have to stabilize our Naira. Let's make this unification work. Even if the Naira is not going to be that much valued, but at least let's control the volatility in it, that uncertainty. Yes. So this is my thought, my take on the issue of stabilization of Naira.
Exactly. I agree with you, Prof. But one other issue that many viewers out there will be looking at is, how are we going to stabilize food price, food cost, high cost of food in Nigeria? Because our 23.51% food inflation is still very high. As rightly pointed out, we should work towards a one-digit food inflation. So what would be your take in terms of advice to the government on food inflation in Nigeria?
First, there should be, there is this issue of insecurity in the farming regions, which is really serious issue. No matter what policy the government is doing, the production of food in Nigeria is still down because of this insecurity in those regions. So this issue have to be addressed. And then there is this issue of supply chain bottleneck in the food sector, in the agricultural sector. So we also have to address this issue. And then the fuel price increase. It's also an issue, because no matter how you try to stabilize the food, you must transport this food from the producing region to other regions. So therefore, there should be stability also, or there should be decrease in the price of fuel in the country. Then the government must invest in mechanized farming and agro-logistic too, and security to bring in figures down. These security challenges we are facing in those regions should also be addressed. So with this, I think we will see progress in the food inflation. We will see a positive or a progressive effect in this issue of food security.
Exactly. Now, that's a brilliant submission from you, Prof. Now, there's one issue that will not let go. At least in the next 1 minute, you should be able to help us out on that. 27.50% MPR of interest rate by CBN. In May, that will be the second part of the second quarter. They'll be discussing whether to take it up or to bring it down. what would be your suggestion to CBN on this 27.50% interest rate that we experienced in first quarter, but hopefully in May we're expecting a change? So what would be your advice to them? Is it to take it upward or to bring it downward or to still maintain the middle class?
You see, 27.50 is very tight. Let's be sincere. And it's restrictive for credit growth. I mentioned this earlier. So especially for small and medium enterprises, well, this is needed according to the CBN. It's needed in order to reduce the inflation rates.
Exactly.
But the rising of the cost of borrowing is really alarming. And for any country to achieve a desired economic growth, that country should be productive. Productivity is what matters. So if we are making the cost of borrowing very high, then that will really not increase our productivity because the cost of borrowing is really high. So, a dual approach is needed. First, to balance the inflation, the CBN should look for a way to at least bring the inflation down because it's very important for Nigerians, and also to control access to credit. That means this cost of borrowing also. Exactly. Even if the cost of borrowing is high, but they should come up with some strategy whereby Nigerians will have access to credit because it's needed for investment, for productivity, especially with alternative funding schemes. So they should come up with something like that. But for me, actually, 27.5 is very tight.
Very good. I love your submission in that regards. And to the CBN, I think they will take a survey of all analysts, economists in regards to this 27.50% come May 2025 when they do their next MPR meeting. Prof, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
So
I wish you best of luck.
All right. Hopefully, maybe very soon I'll see call on you to be part and parcel of the market report show to analyze for us Nigeria economy.
It's okay. It's okay. I will always be available.
All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day in Kano.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you.